We're coming up to almost 60,000 subscribers to our channel, and we're both flabbergasted and very flattered that so many people have shown an interest in our step back in time endeavor, which, as you know, our persona is that of the mid-1700s. One of the highlights of my day is the comments we get. So I get people who have shared their family history, their life stories, comments, but also questions. And one of the questions has frequently been, what's my backstory? So I was somewhat reluctant, but last episode we did, I showed an expedition that we did to Peru, a mountaineering expedition. Today I'm going to share another bit of my backstory. I'm fast forwarding to the year 2000. The mountaineering expedition was 1988. So, and we're almost done winter. Winter's on its way out now. We're mid-March now. But I'm going to take in this expedition to a part of the world that is perpetual winter, and that's the Antarctic continent. And our goal that year was to actually arrive at the South Pole and spend New Year's Eve in the year 2000 or millennium or Y2K or whatever it was called. But that was our objective, but Mother Nature had some other ideas for us, which I'm going to get into. Need another drink. I've been walking a lot today. Our 10-member expedition begins its trip at Punta Arenas. It's the most southern city in the world, at the southern tip of Chile on the Magellan Straits. And we're going to fly from there in a Hercules aircraft. I've put up a map here, and it shows the black line is our trip in the Hercules. That's to Patriot Hills, our base camp. And from there we're flying the blue line to the last degree, and the red line is our ski to the pole. So we arrive in Punta Arenas. Now, when we get to the Antarctic continent, this big Hercules aircraft has to land on a nice runway. Now, that was something new for me. But they don't like to move the snow down there because it changes the structure of it and it'll pack it. So they want the katabatic winds to come down off the transatlantic mountain range and blow this runway clear. So we wait and we wait and we wait. And we're on a 2-hour standby. Like, we got to have everything packed, ready to be on a plane. Finally, they get a weather report that says we got about 4 days off. And so we made a trip back to a Norwegian whaling station from the 1800s. Never seen anything like it. I'm walking on beach that's literally piled high with whale bones. And you can see the remnants of the ramps where they bring in the whales and bring them up to process them. That's another whole story in itself. But finally we get the notification to be ready, load the trucks, get to the airport, we're on the plane, and we're about a 6.5, 7-hour flight to get to Patriot Hills, land on this runway. And now we have to wait again because the weather gods weren't in our favor, and we have to wait for the weather to be clear enough for the 2 twin otters we're going to take from Patriot Hills, our base camp, to the last degree. So it's a waiting game again. So the dream or the goal of the expedition to get there on New Year's Eve 2000 failed abysmally, and we got there around second, third week of January, somewhere in there. One of the most frequent questions I get from people is that, well, was it cold? Well, heck yeah, it was cold. At Patriot Hills in the base camp, the temperature sort of waffled between -25 and -35. But once we flew to the plateau, the temperatures were plus or minus 40. I think our coldest day was -45, and our warmest day was -36, a balmy 36 though. So yeah, it was cold. But before I get into the actual trip and what it was like, a wee bit of history about the exploration of the Antarctic continent. The first reference to Antarctica actually takes place in the 2nd century AD. And at that time it's just a theory. And Antarctica was coined because it simply meant the opposite end of Arctic. They weren't sure if it was a landmass or what it was. And it wasn't until the 15th and 16th century when sailors had rounded the Cape of Good Hope and Cape Horn, so the southern end of Africa, the southern tip of South America, that they realized, yes, there was something there that was in fact a new continent. James Cook, Captain James Cook, is the first to sail south of the Antarctic Circle. And although he discovered islands, he never actually saw the Antarctic continent. He was close though. The darn fella got within 150 miles of it. Now we fast forward to 1820, and a Russian expedition actually sight the continent for the first time. And the next fellow is a Captain John Davis. Now he was a sealer, and it's questionable whether or not he did, but 1821, it's reportedly said that Davis actually landed on the continent, so the first person. So now there is an explosion of interest worldwide. I mean, they've discovered not a new island or a little tiny part of another foreign country. They've discovered a new continent, and the race is on. This brings us now to what historians call the heroic age of Antarctic exploration. And in 1895, they hold the 6th Annual International Geographic Society hold a conference, and they implore all the scientific societies around the world to start to look at a significant inroads or exploration of the continent. And the heyday begins. So we've got Germany, France, Norway, Sweden, England, Belgium sent a big expedition. All these expeditions are trying to see this, map this. So this historic age starts late 19th century, and it culminates with Ernest Shackleton's expedition in 1917. But the real race for the pole has started. And now we've got Amundsen's expedition from Norway, and we've got Scot's expedition from England, and they're frantically trying to be the first to the pole. They both know what's happening. They both know that they've got the gear, the equipment, the qualifications of their team to actually pull this off, and they're racing for this tiny little point on the very southern tip of this world. In all intents and purposes, for that time period in the world, this is the greatest race. The world's watching. Amundsen is the first to arrive, and he finds the geographic pole, his team, on the 14th of December 1911. He beats Amundsen, who arrives there, let's see, on the 17th of January 1912. So Amundsen beats him by 33 days. And Thomas got a little tent there and the Norwegian flag flying, and there's even pictures of Scot, which I hope I'm able to bring out in this episode. Now Scot, they both start their return trips. They've left food depots. But Scot, his trip goes south at that point, even though he's heading north. Everything goes wrong. His team are fatigued. They're plagued by starvation. They're plagued by the cold. They're gradually losing members. They're dying. And Scot's the last to die. His diaries are found, so we know all of this stuff. And he's found 11 miles from a food depot. 11 miles that would have saved his life. So that brings me to Shackleton, which is, I've done a lot of winter camping and a lot of survival stuff. I've been on the sides of mountains, but anything I've ever done pales by comparison to Ernest Shackleton's expedition of 1917. And I'm going to get into that in a second. It doesn't matter how much I read or documentaries I watch on Shackleton's expedition. So 1914 to 1917, I'm amazed every time I see it. So he arrives short of the continent. His ship, the Endurance, which by the way they recently found, and yeah, you can actually look at pictures. It's I don't know, 1,000 meters down, but in the Weddell Sea, off the ice shelf of Antarctica. But so their ship gets caught in this ice. Now the ice is flowing north, slowly creeping north, and as it's creeping along, it's crushing his ship. So now they have to put up temporary camps. They start drawing sledges. They finally are able to get their lifeboats to open water, and the 28 men on this expedition make it to Elephant Island. Now Elephant Island is uninhabited. That's not going to do them any good. There's no food, and there they are. So Shackleton makes the decision to take 5 of his men and himself in one rowboat, one lifeboat, He leaves 23 men on Elephant Island. They're probably thinking they're never going to see home again, or Shackleton. Shackleton rows that boat 800 miles until he gets to South Georgia Island. Now he gets there, but he knows there's a whaling station there, but the whaling station's on the other side. And it's wintertime, and he has to cross Georgia Island, South Georgia Island, over the mountains to get to the whaling station to raise the alarm. Ships are sent out. They rescue the 23 people back on Elephant Island, and the rest is history. And therein ends that heyday of Arctic exploration. And there are hundreds of people that have died in efforts to get to that tiny little point on this earth, which brings me to my expedition. So I took you on a mountaineering expedition last week. Now we're off to ski to the pole. We've had this 2-week delay in Punta Arenas. Now we've had a 2-week delay at Patriot Hills. Finally the weather clears. We load our sledges into 2 twin otters, and they're going to fly us to that last degree. Now the sledges we're pulling, so we're cross-country skiing. The sledges we're pulling, well, mine weighed a little over my body weight, probably close to 200 pounds. I think I weighed 160. And we start. Now we have to carry everything we need. We have to carry our tentage, our clothing, our sleeping arrangements, our food. And food-wise, we got to pick from the food that they presented us back in Punta Arenas, and they suggested, highly recommended, we take 8,000 calories a day. That'd fatten you up pretty quick if you weren't in minus 40-degree temperature skiing for 12 hours. But what we would do is we would ski for 50 minutes, and we did this like clockwork, that we forced ourselves to stop for 10, and in those 10 minutes we'd eat, and sometimes I'd catch a 5-minute cat nap if I get enough food down. But they say the body will tell you what it needs, and for the first time in my life, at some points in that trip, I was eating tablespoons of butter, just tipping it in the jar and eating the whole table. Now I couldn't do that today, here where I'm sitting right now. It's something unheard of, but the body was telling me I needed fat. So we were, I think, 11 days total. We did about 10 kilometers a day, set up camp. Next morning, get up. Now, there is no night. It's 24 hours of sunlight. Interesting, the sun goes around you sort of at 10 o'clock in the sky, and it does this circle around you. And it's absolutely fascinating because it makes a sundog around it. That was pretty neat. We finally arrive at the Amundsen Scot Center, the American Center, right at the geographic South Pole. I get out my Canadian flag, proud Canadian, and I fly that. I put my GPS that I was using right on the wand that marks the actual point, and I was out about 0.2 of a meter in all of that skiing. So they're a pretty darn accurate device. I also took out a compass to see what it'd do, and it wasn't a happy camper. It was doing everything. Which makes you wonder how Amundsen and Scott ever found the place. Another interesting thing, since Amundsen planted the first post to mark that pole, the Earth shifts on its axis. So every year they mark that. So he's there in he's there in 1911, and I'm there in the year 2000, 89 years later. And the Earth had moved approximately 27 meters. So what they do is they'll put a wand in every year where the actual post is, and that's where I set my GPS. And then we got to tour the facility. We stayed there for 2 nights. Planes came in, picked us up, flew us out. Yeah, and that's my ski to the South Pole, and a wee bit more of my backstory.